All right, let's put on our detective hats. Today, we're hunting a digital ghost. A critical server's been hit, and we're going to follow the breadcrumbs hidden deep inside the code to figure out who did it. We're diving headfirst into the world of UNIX forensics.
So, picture this. A major server gets hacked. The attacker is a phantom. No witnesses, no fingerprints, nothing. Just a silent digital crime scene. So, what do you do? Where do you even begin to look for clues when all you've got is ones and zeros?
Well, the first rule of digital forensics is pretty much the same as for a real-world crime scene. Do no harm. You can't just go poking around on the live system, right? That's like trampling all over the evidence. So the absolute first, non-negotiable step is to make a perfect, bit-for-bit copy of the entire disk. It's called a forensic duplicate, and that copy becomes your sandbox, letting you investigate without ever touching the original evidence.
But of course, it's not always that simple. Modern systems have their own tricks. Many of them use something called logical volume management, or LVM, which is kind of like a Russian nesting doll of data that can hide things from your standard tools. So investigators have to be clever. They use a series of commands to carefully peel back those layers, one by one, and make sure they get an image of every single part of the system. It's slow and methodical, but it ensures no stone is left unturned.
Okay, so we've got our pristine copy of the evidence. Now the real hunt begins. And the very first place a good investigator shines a flashlight is into the dark corners of the system's startup process. Why? Because it's the perfect hiding spot for an intruder who wants to make sure their malicious code comes back to life every single time the server reboots.
You see, there are basically two main ways a Unix system gets itself up and running. The System V style, which you'll see on most Linux systems, and the BSD style. Each one has its own unique roadmap of files and scripts it follows. For an attacker, this is like an all-you-can-eat buffet of hiding spots. All these different places where they can tuck away 1 or 2 lines of code to give themselves a permanent backdoor.
And this isn't just a theory. Check this out from a real case file. An attacker used a nasty piece of malware called a rootkit, which is designed to give them total control, and all they did was add 2 lines of code to one of the most important startup files. Just 2 lines. That's it. And that tiny little change was enough to make sure their backdoor program started up every single time, disguised as a normal system service. So simple, but absolutely devastating.
Finding a persistent backdoor is a huge deal, but it's really just scratching the surface. After checking the boot process, the investigation has to go deeper. It's time to drill down into the file system itself, because this is where every single action, every file touched, read, or deleted leaves behind a tiny digital footprint for us to follow. Now, to understand these footprints, you first have to understand something called an inode. The best way to think about it is like a card in an old-school library card catalog. The card isn't the book, right? But it tells you everything about the book, who wrote it, when it was published, and most importantly, exactly which shelf to find it on. Well, an inode does the exact same thing for a computer file.
And this is where it gets really cool, because this is how we build our timeline of the crime. Every single inode stores up to 4 different timestamps. You've got the M time for when the file's content was last modified, the A time for the last time it was accessed, the C time for when its metadata changed, and even a D time for when it was deleted. You put all of those together and suddenly you have a play-by-play of what happened. Now, if there's one thing you take away from this, it's this. The C time is an investigator's secret weapon. A really savvy intruder can use special tools to fake the modification and access times to try and cover their tracks. But the C time, it's practically impossible to fake. That's because the C time is controlled by the system's kernel, the very heart of the operating system. If you try to change anything else, the kernel updates the C time. It is the one clock you can absolutely trust.
So what about covering tracks? What happens when an intruder tries to delete their tools and log files? You'd think that evidence is just poof. Gone forever, right? Well, here's one of the coolest secrets in forensics. On a Unix system, deleted almost never really means gone.
Here's why. When you delete a file, the system doesn't actually bother to erase the ones and zeros on the disk. That takes way too much effort. Instead, it just does a little bookkeeping. It takes the file name out of the directory, and it marks the space that the file was using as available. But, and this is the crucial part, the actual data and all that precious metadata in the inode is still sitting right there on the disk, just waiting to be found.
What this means is that deleting a file basically freezes its metadata in time. That inode, with all its original timestamps and information, is perfectly preserved until some new file just happens to overwrite that exact spot on the disk.
This creates a ghost in the machine, a digital trail that an investigator can uncover months or sometimes even years later.
Okay, let's put this all together. We know about inodes, we know about those trustworthy C times, and we know that deleted files aren't really gone. So how do we use all of that to find the smoking gun? That one malicious file that an intruder has cleverly disguised to look like a totally normal part of the system.
Well, the technique is actually beautiful in its simplicity. See, when a computer is first set up, all the files that are created together in the same directory get assigned inode numbers that are right next to each other in a nice, neat sequence. So if you're looking through a directory and you see a file with an inode number that's wildly different from all of its neighbors, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Take a look at this. This is the bin directory where essential system commands live. Now look at those inode numbers. They're all up in the 1.2 million range. 1.2 million, 1.2 million. Wait a second. The ls command right there, its inode number is only 164,019. That is completely out of place. Ding, ding, ding. That is our first major red flag. That file is not like the others.
And here it is, the aha moment. The investigator takes that suspicious inode number and searches the entire system for it. And what pops up? It's linked to two places. First, to that fake ls command we just saw, and second, to a hacker toolkit hidden away in a temporary folder. The attacker replaced a real system file with their own Trojan horse, and that one little out-of-place inode number just unraveled their entire plan.
So finding the malicious file is a huge victory, but the job's not quite done. We've found the digital weapon, but now we have to connect it to a real person. We have to unmask the culprit.
To do that, investigators turn to the system's account files, like the one at etc/password. These files literally contain a list of every user account on the system. By matching the timestamps and ownership data from the malicious files to the user accounts, they can pinpoint exactly which account was used for the attack. And just like that, they connect the what and the how of the crime to the who.
And that brings us to a final thought. As we've seen, from the moment a computer turns on to the way it keeps track of every single file, our digital lives leave behind an incredible number of traces. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In a world that is literally built out of data, is any crime truly untraceable?